Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English, and this week we're continuing with our discussion about Venus retrograde. And I've welcomed back to the studio, we've welcomed back Gregory Rozek, who's a professional astrologer working in Poland, and he's also a graphic designer. Hi, Gregory, how are you?
Hi, Mary. I'm fine. I hope you are too. In the retrograde times.
Yeah, Venus is still retrograde at the moment. So if we get lots of freezing with the video, don't worry, we'll make sure that the audio is great as well. Now, because we're talking about Venus retrograde, Gregory, can you just remind us a teeny bit about how the whole retrograde thing happens, and specifically with Venus? Because I've had a discussion with the lady that we used in the chart today, and she thought that every retrograde planet, it had to be opposition to the sun, but apparently that's not the case when it comes to Mercury and Venus. So if you could just give us a little quick summary of the difference, because I think they're calling them, I know Erin Sullivan calls them, they're like inner planets and outer planets or something. So can you just go through the retrograde thing for us again?
Yes, so to quickly answer your last question, we divide planets to inner planets, which means their orbits are between the Earth and the Sun. And so it's basically Mercury and Venus for retrograde planets, and the other planets. I'm just losing the words. What's the opposite of interior? Superior planets are planets, or every piece of junk that is outside the orbit of Earth, up to Pluto, like Sedna, any kind of junk up there. So we only have two interior planets, Mercury and Venus, and they are always close to the Sun, so they cannot be in the opposition as the other planets. So for the majority of the planets, being close to the Sun is the opposite of being retrograde, because on the one side they disappear in the Sun because the Sun is too bright, and on the other side they make this retrograde loop from our perspective of tropical astrology, which for us is super important because we live on Earth, so we don't care so much about the astronomical heliocentric zodiac. So all right, so let's jump to a picture, a visual story I wanted to give you about Venus and Mercury retrograde, how they retrograde.
Thank you.
To answer your client's question. So imagine you are inside a one-room house which has 12 walls made of glass. So you have 12 perfect windows with no breaks between them. Each of them is a zodiac sign. So you are the Earth, and you can turn around to see all the zodiac signs. So around the house, always the king, the sun, is walking around in one direction, always in the same direction, making a circle, and it's quite far away. You can see him on the horizon. So he's moving very slowly, right? You can also imagine that each window has exactly 30 vertical blinds. So if you open the blinds, you can see the windows divided.
Carry on.
Okay. Did we have a disconnection?
We just had, we're back again. So you've got got the blinds back to the windows. Yeah.
Yes. So so then you can see the suns going in circle around your house. So he has like two kids, a boy, small boy Mercury, who is going around him in the same direction, but he running like a little dog or little kid, and also a slightly bigger daughter, Venus, who is also walking around, but she gets more distance from the sun, from the king, but they're both doing the circus. So if king is going in the constant, almost constant speed, you can sometimes see the kids running in the same direction as the king, but when they get before him, they have to turn around and start running in the opposite direction for you. So it looks like they're running backwards. They get behind him and circle him again and again. So this circling of Mercury and Venus is what actually we see astrologically and astronomically. So Mercury and Venus are always either behind the sun or in front of the sun, like this kind of circle. So half circle in front of us, half circle behind us. So when they run forward in the same direction as the sun, they are direct. But when they sort of like turn around to finish the half of the circle and have to, you know, go behind the king. So this, so you see them in front of the king at this point, and they seem to be running in the other direction. Also, the two halves of the these circles they run around are not the same, because when they I'm not sure if it's good to explain, but when they run the same direction, as opposed to running in the opposite direction of the king, it takes a different amount of time. So that's the difference. So, for example, Venus is retrograde about I think 7% of time.
It's once every 18 months, is that right? Venus goes retrograde?
Yeah. So it's once every 19 months. It's also interesting with Venus. She's very special, like aesthetically planet, because she always does retrograde periods. It's called a five-pointed star of Venus, or even five-petaled flower, because when she, if you draw a zodiac circle and map every time where in the zodiac she goes retrograde, she would, like, for example, first go retrograde, for example, in the middle of Aries. Then she would go into the middle of, which one is there? I think it's, yeah, Scorpio, because it's always like around eighth sign ahead. So if she starts in the first sign of the zodiac, the next one will be in the 8th. Then I think it's Gemini, like that. And if you, so it's she does 5 times. When she does it the 6th time, she goes back almost to the same degree. So if we started with Venus retrograde, for example, at 10 Aries, and she was going retrograde until 1 Aries, and it was, let's say, 10 of January when she started, and so 5 retrograde cycles later, this will be almost exactly 8 years later. It's usually 2 or 3 days later in the calendar. So, like, if it was the 10th January, like 20th January, and the degree would be also like 2-3 degrees away. So it would be almost like the same. So with Venus retrogrades, with all this repetition, 8 year is actually in ancient astrology the small years of Venus. So Venus gets activated every 8 years, because she goes exactly to the same position in the sky, exactly in the same time of the year, same month, almost the same day, and in the same relation to the sun. So beginning of the retrograde in Aries is at the same time of the year, and ending is almost at the same time of the year. So she almost like keeps repeating. Well, with time, this gets, it shifts a little. So, for example, what once was 29th Aquarius starting retrograde, and 8 years later it could be one Capricorn, one Pisces or something like that. So it's not ideal, but it's almost perfect. Yeah. And if you draw, since she always does next retrograde about 8 signs further on, if you draw the lines between each following retrograde, then you end up with a pentagram-like star, where you draw a star with just one line, and you finish in the place where you started. Like no getting your pen off the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a spirograph, because I will put a link on the show notes for this. A guy, he's done a little video. It's an Indian astrologer, and he's done a video about the orbits of Venus, and it does make that beautiful pattern. It makes the little sort of swirly things. But also the other thing, I talked about that because Erin Sullivan talks about it in her book, and I have mentioned that. So it's lovely how when Venus does its retrograde, goes backwards, goes through the different signs and all the angles and everything in between. It's quite amazing. I mean, I wouldn't remember all of that astrologically because I don't have a big enough brain like you do. So, but it's beautiful to look at. It's the fact that any planet could make, and it is Venus we're talking about, could make such a beautiful shape afterwards. It's like, it's just incredible. And then the 5-pointed or 6-pointed star or whatever it is, where it's like,
Five.
Yeah, 5 points.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so it could be only planet of beauty and art that even in retrograde does create beautiful art in our skies.
Yes. Yeah. And then the thing about it going back, because it is going retrograde at the moment, and then what is it? Am I correct in saying that in 8 years' time it will be back, because it's retrograding in the sign of Capricorn at the moment? Would it be correct to say that the next time it retrogrades will be 8 years' time and again in Capricorn, or have I got that wrong?
Yes, it's correct. So it's like maddeningly precise, because it will be 8 years in December, almost like the same date of December and almost the same degree. So like so close that it could be negligible, because calendar is not ideal. So we could say that we could blame it on the calendar or something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay,
so if something happens this year, then 8 years later, it might be echo of that exactly.
And this was what Erin was talking about in her book, that think of that 8-year cycle. If you've had something happen during a Venus retrograde, think back to when was the last time, which would be 8 years. So if you're, for instance, if you're born with a Venus retrograde, maybe you need to be plotting for yourself every time that it then does a retrograde again. So you'd be 8, then you'd be 16, then you'd be whatever, 24. I'd have to do that in my head. You'd have to be sort of doing an 8-year cycle, which is different then obviously from Saturn, which is a 29-year cycle stuff. But yeah, okay. Don't want to confuse things. So basically what you're saying is that the relationship between the sun that we see and Mercury and Venus, which we can see, they're between us and the sun rather than behind us. Yeah, so they'll always be visible to us, but occasionally they're going to obviously go behind the sun because they are also orbiting the sun. Yes, so us, Mercury, Venus are going around the sun, and the Earth is this side of it, whilst the other planets, Mars and all the rest, are on the other side of the Earth. So we're the third planet in from the sun, because it goes Mercury, Venus, and then the Earth. Is that right? Yeah. And then obviously the moon goes around us. So there's sort of like an order of things. Okay, great. So lovely. So tell us a bit more then. So give us those keywords again for when a planet goes retrograde. What do we need to remember?
Okay, so for the retrogrades in general, no matter which planet it is.
Yeah.
So first of all, like spirituality, they are more intuitional and perfect almost with spiritual things, but bad with mundane things. Like they're almost like anti-magnets, and like things break in their arms, something like that. So it's that. And then classical keywords are from Valence in ancient astrology. Is like disruptions and things not going according to your plans. It's basically, you thought the kid is running ahead of the sun, and then he turns around and you're, oh no, whoa, my plans just no. My betting for this horse is like, no. So it's basically that. And the Sal's 9th century, for my favorite keywords, repetitions. So all this read this, read that, redoing, revision. If there's an error or something, like it will be getting back and grinding and finding out what is wrong with something. Why is it stuck? Or things getting back, like you were saying, with Venus 8 years later, for example, like your ex is coming back to you, and you had a dramatic history 8 years ago or something like that. So it's re-emerging of old topics, things like that, or repairing something. Like they're good with repairing things, but they're bad with starting things, because, you know, it won't go according to the plan. But if you are trying to revision something, they're perfect. So collapse is another like keyword from Sal. Then disagreement and disobedience. So like these opposite magnets, like they don't agree with things going forward, with material things, with the status quo, with all these things that are sort of like rules in society or in the world. They are like going against the grain, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was also taking it for the Greek word for retrograde, anapodismos. So from the word is anapodize. So it means like going backwards, like putting your steps backwards, literally. But if you say something like Venus is retrograding in ancient Greek, like Aphrodite, anapodize, it can mean different thing also, not just if we know it's about a planet, and it will be Hortus Aphrodite, so we would the thing, the Aphrodite rules, and in case of astrology we'll know it's a star. The Aphrodite rules. But if we just say that Aphrodite retrogrades in ancient Greek, it could mean she is calling back someone to revision something. For example, like her kid has done something. Hey, come back. No, you can't go already. There's something wrong. Or in the judicial setting, like you call back someone as a witness to what's the word? What do you do with a statement witness? To revise, like, or re-examine because there's something wrong with that. So also correcting oneself. So if Venus retrogrades, it could mean, well, I said I love him, but no, actually, like, take it back. I put my feet like backwards, and I like turn around, run away from what I said. It's no longer true. So like retracting oneself. Also, the first portion of verb ana is prefix that also can mean upwards, or make it better, like thoroughly, like intensify something, do it again and backwards. So it doesn't just mean that go backwards. It means all of these things we learn in like ancient authors. So they didn't have to explain all of these keywords, because the word was specially probably chosen that it had those telling meanings, right?
Okay, that's interesting. So they already had a word that they would know the meaning of without us like now having to translate the kind of thing. Right, okay. That's
so we use the word retrograde, and it's just has no meaning to us because it's a Latin based. But if we could be using like planet deciding to turn around or returning, something like that, probably this will be like more imagination like inducing for us to understand what could it mean if my Venus decides to like turn around at this time or something like that, or retract its steps, or yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I was reading Erin Sullivan's book again, and she says natal Venus retrograde. Let me just get some bits that she was saying on here, because she's a goddess. We love Erin. Where are we now? When Venus is retrograde. No, there was one bit here. Let me just find it. I've got all these little stickers on my book here so I can get the right bit. So she talks about that whole quintile thing and the different shapes and whatever. There is, because she's talking about yes, the transmutative aspect of the Venus retrograde cycle is evident during the transit period because there seems to be a mirror image of what one's normal method of arriving at conclusions. So she talks a lot in there about when Venus retrogrades, that it isn't that the person with Venus retrograde needs to rely upon their instincts rather than their rationale. Okay, so she talks about, you know, being a child, etc., and that when you're younger, Venus is about tactile. It's the touch that you get from your parents or your caregivers or whatever. And when it's retrograde, you should trust what your instincts are, not what other people should tell you, because apparently people that have got retrograde planets are more attuned to the I don't know what the word is now. They're more attuned to the feelings behind things rather than the rationale. Okay, so we're not making this logical or rational. We need to do a feelings-based thing. Would you agree with that idea, that if Venus is retrograde, it needs to be more intuitive rather than rational?
Well, it generally applies to all the retrograde planets.
Right.
Yes, like they are more like spiritual. They just have intuition how things work, as opposed to people generally having to, you know, reverse engineer things, devise some like rules which are not actually true but helps us understand. So retrograde person doesn't go well with these artificial systems. It just has the glimpse of like, yeah, I understand what I need to like know about this, as opposed to, you know, all this information dump that maybe is not beneficial for them to follow like normal people.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is good to, you know, is the good analogy of it's not good to judge the fish by its ability to climb the tree. They are the fish, so like why would they climb the tree when they can just, you know, swim around the waters wherever they want?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So but with Venus, yeah, the touch thing was I think quite Venusian here.
Mm-hmm.
So I besides, you know, studying the ancient and classical and also Indian astrology about retrogrades, as with retrogrades it doesn't matter about the system because it's visual phenomenon, so you can use any astrology system because it's not based on zodiac, sidereal, tropical, or whatever. Like it's just a visual phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
So, besides, you know, studying like vulgarizing, you know, having my Excel spreadsheets and all the notes and, you know, remembering all the stuff, I also like to do special like channeling, and I did channel Venus retrograde, and it's quite interesting.
Oh,
because
cool.
it is something that you touched upon on the Erin's quote, because I imagine immediately I was like an 8-year-old, I imagine, because Venus age is 8,
Yep.
girl, in an almost fetal position in the chair, and like having fun, almost like I was having cocktails. I was like this, I was like that. It was like, you know, really feeling this kind of like the keywords of Venus normally is pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Like love and pleasure, like in the very first like sources about Venus are two core meanings for Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage being, you know, the offshoot of love, of course. So the pleasures, yes. So it's like a very untraumatized little 8-year-old girl who is like just having pleasure somewhere, you know, in the chair in the garden, something like that. Like, oh, a nice interesting bug, nice weather, oh, this feels nice. Like she it's so primordial pleasures. She's like, she doesn't want like ice cream specifically, or I don't want like to deal with this person, like nothing of the typical like civilizational pursuits or pleasures. So they seek actual pleasures, like true, like naturalness. So they also are very the pure Venus retrograde, because, you know, it can be tainted with like different things, but the essence of Venus retrograde, like to kind of understand it from her point of view, is she's very content with herself. Also like comfortable, so she doesn't like seek approval in other people. She doesn't need specific things or follow specific scenarios to feel happy. They also like are not about beautifying themselves, but are about inner beauty, but actual inner beauty, not pretended inner beauty. They operate so much with like emotions, but in a sense that they can be so happy just by feeling their emotions, or like they can be happy with themselves. So if they get persuaded by, oh, you should find a husband or something like that, or like pursue something outside, it will not work so much for them. And also they get bored really fast with civilization things, with people. So they are very good with like a quick fling. For example, if they get fascinated, get the chemistry with someone, it's almost like exchanging like gems in the auras, like, oh my god, we're feeling so like nice, like an item, etc. But once they try to get into the box of like what it means to be in a relationship, etc., then as it's a funny wording from the channeling, because like the girl said, then the poopy spills out, and either we see we like the new situation, or we absolutely hate it, or we just learned what we want next,
right,
from another person, something like that. So in classical delineations, Venus retrograde is good for marriage.
Is good or not good for marriage?
Because not good for marriage, because normal Venus is about marriage, etc., and like that. But this one is sort of like reverse of disagreeing, like we were saying, collapsing marriage, all these keywords we can attach to marriage, and we can understand why people are warned against marrying when they have Venus retrograde, right?
Okay. Yeah. Because I've got Adrian Duncan is saying people with Venus retrograde shouldn't allow themselves to be influenced by the judgment of other people. Women with this position would be very independently minded, very rarely allowing themselves to be put in a position where they can be pushed around by men. So that's Venus in Aries retrograde, but that's a Venus retrograde thing. Personal freedom and honor are more important. But it's interesting what you were saying in your meditation, that the child that is there is just happy in the situation, so they're not angsting for something else. It's that their bountiful is increased because it sounds like they're being more there in the moment rather than wishing for something else they don't have. They're finding the beauty that they've got. Okay, that's interesting.
Yes, exactly. Being in the moment and freedom were like keywords that were repeated several times. So, for example, also when Venus retrograde is bounded, for example, by Saturn, like being in, I don't know, Aquarius or Capricorn, or conjoined Saturn, she's not very, it's not very typical Venus retrograde, because typical Venus retrograde is, about freedom from chains of social norms or things like that. Right. And Saturn like makes it like actually almost like forces such person to go into this role against their will, something like that. So I know a couple of examples of Venus retrograde with Saturnian tones, and you wouldn't tell that have this, little girl satisfied with her.
Oops, hold on. We've just frozen. Okay, yeah, come back. Yeah, so little girl.
Yeah, we are back. What's there? Like the issue strong Venus retrograde can have is not realizing that this pleasant feeling is, just about me being in the moment. And if I was someone else at this point, it's because of this person, like I speak, because it's always is. People say, you feel butterflies when you meet, love interest or something like that. So they can misinterpret it, and then pursue this person, not maybe always realizing that it was just me all the way, and this person was incidental in the way that for this moment we were compatible, but we are not meant to be compatible with this exact feeling I had. And it's a strong pleasure for them once they feel real pleasure. We are not compatible with having this thing for years or something like that. So it could be a very, very big trap if someone wants quickly marry, Venus retrograde. If it's a strong planet, then then you get these feelings of suffocation, either you or your partner, especially if Venus is related to 7th house, which rules marriage specifically. So then you will have some tensions, etc. So it's really nice to be around Venus retrograde for short periods, but when you are, in longer relationships, for example, as family members, then, it gets even people around could have thoughts that why did this person, for example, marry someone, or being with this person, someone might start thinking a lot about divorcing, or people are incompatible, etc. Having this clash of understanding of social systems. It's hard to be in one place, once the Venus goes through her cycle. So if it's one retrograde later, then you start to get into more serious relationship. But also after 8 years, you will have you will see the most of what this retrograde Venus can be about in someone. And also it's funny, or interesting rather, that the 8 years of Venus and relationship, there is organization called Gottman Institute by, I think it was a psychologist and someone else, Mary counseling. They published several books saying that between 7 or 8 years is the period after which most of the breakups and divorces happen.
Right.
So if you are 7 years with someone,
7 years. It was called the 7 year itch.
Dangerous year. Yeah. Then you are next 8 years. So it's 14. Am I doing my math correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, two times 16, something like that. Then there's the crisis, etc. So they are in almost the same increments as Venus retrograde. So it's probably related, right?
Yeah. I've heard of that. Okay, so we've got a chart example here, and we've had a lady that's very happy to share our chart, and we're calling her Shh. So so we have her chart. So what? So Shish will be listening. And we've got 29 degrees Taurus Aries ascendant, isn't it? It's just the end of Aries, yeah. And then her sun sign is Aries, her Venus is Aries, and her moon is Cancer. And because I put a call out a few weeks ago, if you've got Venus retrograde in your chart, let me know. So she's very kindly agreed to share her chart. And there's a few things in there. Obviously, we're not going to discuss every other aspect of it, but we'd like to go through and be able to help her understand a bit about her own Venus. Now, she has told me about her previous dating history, that she did get married pretty young the first time, and there's been some other relationships since then, but she's in a more stable relationship now. But what are the key things that we need to be considering when we're looking specifically at Shish's chart? What came up for you when you were looking at it?
Yes, yeah, so first of all, Venus is not just retrograde, but also on the side. So to the sun, that she is we call it under the beams of the sun, or combust. Like there are different definitions in different tradition, but it basically means that if planet is so close to the sun that the light of the sun is so strong that you cannot even like see this planet even at night, because when the sun sets a few minutes after it's no longer light, you should be able to see planets that are close by. But because they are so close, you are not able to catch that moment, because they are so close to the sun that they don't show up on the dark night sky.
Yeah.
So this basically means in tradition that the planet is disappearing for a period. So it's the same. It's an analogous or analog for the new moon. The moon also, when it's close to the sun, it disappears, and then we have new moon and it starts to build its light again. So that sticks out. So it's not just like Venus retrograde in Aries. It's at the around the middle point of retrogradation, because it's approaching the sun. It's also within 5 degrees, so it's definitely invisible, because around between 5 and 6 degrees, the ephemeris of so-called arcus visionis, the arc of vision, is for Venus. So if the Venus is closer than 5 degrees to the sun, it's always combust. When it's around 6 degrees, it differs. You would have to check the tables for that. So also both of them, so Venus and a sun, are opposed to Jupiter. And now we have a little piece of retrograde information, because what happens when a retrograde Venus, when it's close to the sun, is opposed by Jupiter?
Which is also
Jupiter
retrograde.
is opposing the sun,
yeah,
automatically, therefore it's retrograde, right? So if you have any planet in the same sign with the sun, retrograde, because great when they are roughly opposite.
Oh, sorry. Gregory,
so,
can you just repeat that bit, because I just lost a little bit of sound there. So when the sun and is near to another planet, that's combust if it's within 5 degrees, and we've got the opposition to Venus. So anything that's opposite the sun will always be retrograde anyway, because that's a retrograde rule, that if something's opposite in your chart to the sun, then that planet. So I've got Pluto opposition my sun's sign, and I think my Pluto's retrograde, because they're both in opposite signs. So when something's opposite, there's going to be a retrograde, but that doesn't apply for Venus or Mercury, because Venus and Mercury are our side of the sun, okay? And she's also got the sun and Venus combust, which is the flash term for they're close to each other and you wouldn't be able to see. And actually I have seen that, because sometimes when I go outside with the telescope, with the binoculars, if a planet is near to the moon, for instance, you can't flipping see it, because the light of the moon will be sometimes stronger than whatever the planet is. Not always, but it depends what it is. And also Venus is a tricky planet to see, because you either see it early morning or you see it late at night. Is that right? And then it seems as if they're on different horizons, because they'll be east or west, but that's just the way that it orbits, because it's because of where it is in the what's the word, out there in space, but on Earth, to us, and so the ancient Babylonians thought that the rising Venus and the setting, but they thought that they were two different planets, because Venus would rise and then Venus would go down. So they gave them two different names, I think, because they could see them on different horizons. One was on the east and one was on the west. So that's the strange thing about the way that we on Earth see Venus. So that needs to be taken into account, because that's what Erin talks about astrologically as well, that Venus can be ruled by the sign Libra or by Taurus, and so Taurus is more kinesthetic and Venus is more Libra is more cerebral. So within Venus itself anyway, anywhere as a planet, there's the kinesthetic side and there's the aesthetic side. So how do I look, and also how do I feel? That's how Venus can be expressed, which I thought was quite interesting. But you can't see them if the sun is going to be there as well. Venus will not be visible. So it's quite unusual that the date that Shish was born, because there's quite a lot going on astrologically. So her chart's quite unique. So carry on. Yeah, you're saying about the Jupiter opposition.
Yes. So, it's a lot to unpack, especially like if we are doing this for more baby steps astrology, right? Because, retrograde Venus, which we even didn't cover, like all it can describe, being combust as well, and being opposite another retrograde planet. Also important because I use the whole sign houses, the ancient system. You are using, I think, the equals houses from the ascendant. For me, in this the old system, or basic system, like any sign is a house. So for me, entire Aries is the first house.
Okay.
You would touch on it. You would say it's in the 12th house. I take it because the ascendant is in the last degree, the 29 Aries. We will differ on that probably. So for me, this opposition is in between the first and the 7th house. Like the Venus being in Aries rules the 7th house because Libra is in 7th house. And so Jupiter there is also in Indian astrology, Jupiter is the significator of husbands.
Okay.
So it also fits here. So we have a very strange correlation between those things.
Well, so even if we don't take Jupiter being in the 7th, like with whole sign, even with equal sign, Jupiter is in Libra, and Libra is the sign of relationships. And then Jupiter, the lucky, optimistic planet retrograding, is in the sign of relationships. So regardless of house system, if we just look at the sign that it's in, and I've had quite a number of clients that have had a major planet, sorry, an inner planet opposition to when they're Aries, if they've got Libra things going on, like an Aries with a Libra ascendant, for instance, it's a really tricky thing for an Aries to resolve, because Aries is always me and I'm number one, whilst Libra is the sign of the other person. So there's constant conflict then. And obviously if you've got a planet that's, she hasn't, but if she had some other planet that's opposite, like Mars, which is her ruler, if she had that opposite, that would be even more tricky. Luckily she hasn't got that. She's got it square, but it's not opposition.
Yeah, she's got a lot here with Moon and Mars being the fourth sign from the ascendant and squaring both Jupiter and Venus. So maybe quickly about Venus being combust. So if planet is combust, it's almost like being invisible because of the sun. So the planet will feel like desperate for attention or something like that and would not get it. So like the classical delineations for combust planet is like it's some kind of like deranged, like it's weak, it will not give anything, it's just burned down by the sun, or that it is hidden. So what it does is not visible. So if you have such placements with something like too close to the sun, it's invisible. You can like suffer because you would like to be recognized, you are not, but you could also do things in secrecy and no one will know, no one will find out. For example, here we would have significations for secret relationships, or like some secrets with relationships, or people not knowing, like marrying in secret, something like that. Especially with the opposition of Jupiter. Also combust planets would be quite like awkward about like wanting to show off, and there would be some kind of traumatic thing, because the sun is the usually the father is the signification, or something like in authority, something like that. And here in Aries, very strong, it's exalted. So it makes that if it's Venus, it's pleasures, needs, love. So like the most like basic example of like mini psychology for that is, as this little girl, perhaps like she wanted to hug her dad, or like said I love you daddy or something like that, and like he was busy or something else, or he was very important, so he was doing something important like king like stuff, and she realized that she's not getting that. So this creates a specific don't know what's the best word to use, schematic, what she would crave so much for love, attention, for being, seen, appreciated.
Mhm.
But also because she wants it so much, it will be a bit awkward. Also, she would have this history of several times people like not giving what she wants because she wants it so much.
Mhm.
Because she's invisible, people like would tend to, miss her like gestures, etc.
Mhm.
So she will build upon and upon, and this can create such behavior that she would really want it, but has learned that it's very like awkward, and I get burned when I try to. So I will pretend I am not so about love. I will just, screw around with people or something like that. I will just approach a guy and make him, I don't know, fall in love with me or something. And I won't be about love. And it's actually, attempt like to not see this thing and distance yourself, because benefic planets, when they combust, they tend to pretend there is no problem. Like they don't show off like, no, I am so Mars would be, packing in the gym or something like that. Yes, I am super strong. But like as a benefic, she would pretend that everything is all right. This is what I want. I am that kind of person. Like,
Oh, so I'm in
so
control.
a soft approach to this. Sorry.
That I'm in control and I know what I'm doing would be what this person would be saying. Yeah.
Yes, but it will be very soft. It will not be, trying to prove like I will prove you. No, I will make you feel that it's not a problem for me. Something like that, right?
Okay.
So, but here,
Yeah.
but here we have okay, sorry, go on.
No, it's right. Because Venus is in Aries, does that affect it? The sign that Venus is in?
Very much, because the stronger the sun is, and the weaker the Venus is, which is the case in Aries, because the sun is exalted here and Venus rules Libra, so she's opposite her sign in Libra. So she manages it with tension of opposition, but also in Aries, she doesn't see the sign of Taurus, which she should also rule, because next one, so it's not a classical aspect. So she is kind of not doing well with her things in Aries because of the situation. And Sun is doing very great. So, Sun is dominating. So people usually say that Venus is resigning her signification and Sun uses it. It's so, for example, Sun uses the 5th house, so that children or pleasure or artistic pursuits would be taking away the energy of love. So instead of like pursuing love and relationships, there'll be more impact on those things. It's also in the 1st house, so it would be very important. It would be all about her, even though Venus is not the ruler of the ascendant. She's in the 1st house, so it's that. But here, Venus is actually in her dignities. because we divide each sign in so-called Egyptian bounds. And for example, with Aries, the first 6 degrees are ruled by Jupiter, the following 6 degrees from 6 to 12 by Venus, then up till 20 is Mercury, and then the last 10 are divided equally for Mars and Saturn. So both the Sun and Venus are in the bounds of Venus. So or confines or terms is the term. So it basically means that the signification is somehow confined to Venusian things. So she gets a bit of an upper hand, but also if Venus has some dignity, it's called being in a chariot. So it means that, and it's such an ancient chariot that had a roof over it. So it's protecting Venus from the sun. So it's not fully protecting it because it's just the bounds, not the signs. But even the sign might not fully protect it because we still don't see the bloody Venus. So it's not like some kind of like magic trick to cancel that. But she has some like strong dignities, which makes we would read in this particular chart the combo of retrograde and combustion more positively.
Okay, and
but
so
also,
yeah, I was going to say, what advice would you give to somebody that had Venus retrograde? So if you had a client that had Venus retrograde in your chart, what advice could you give to them to help them assimilate the planet being retrograde? Because if we read all the old astrology books, we're going to get scared out of our pants for how Venus is retrograde is maybe not as acceptable socially. And then do we want to be part of a social society anyway? You know, maybe there are people that need to be outliers. Yeah. But you know, we've got a lovely chart here, and we could quite easily point out all the negatives of anything in astrology, but there's plenty of positives as well. Yes. Regarding, okay, so we're going to disagree on houses, but definitely the signs that things are in. Yeah. So this is somebody that obviously in this case knows what they want, and they're not afraid to be able to have it. So that's very evident. But people in general with Venus retrograde in their natal charts, is there any advice that we can give to them to help them make the best of the Venus retrograde that they have? What would you suggest?
Well, first of all, it's quite a difference how much this Venus retrograde is important, because if it's here, like in the first house or ruling the first house, or aspecting strongly the sun or your ascendant ruler, etc. And also if you have a lot of retrograde planets, this would make it more important, because otherwise if it's just the one retrograde planet, Venus retrograde, and somewhere, you know, tucked in the, I don't know, in the cadent house, like somewhere where it's not super like making aspect, etc., then probably it's, you know, it's just a small facet of yourself. So we have to take into consideration how much it's crucial for me to take notice of the Venus needs, right? And even if it rules myself, like the ascendant, only if it's more ruling my partner or my boss or my children, like you a little bit like change your focus based on that. But generally, you know, it's about the intention, the intuition, the upward spiritual, not down, getting your hands of things, also being aware of the like inner pleasures. Like you can so easily feel enormous pleasure by just allowing yourself. Other people like have it much more difficult. Like they have to get some things, achieve something, create something, etc. Like you don't have. You can be just like a child that just enjoys it. Also being aware of, you know, the troubles related with that you are not wired as a normal person. So maybe thinking about marriage, maybe it's not for you, like because, you know, it's enjoying the moment, and if you try to make long-term plans based on that, it's not this Venus. She's more getting with the flow, etc., and what feels right. So she would like change her mind, like being patient, wants to want something now or never. Like so, for example, if you can find someone that can like understand and appreciate that, so maybe try to be, I don't know, upfront sort of about that, so people won't take you for granted that you are like everybody else. You can say, I'm not like other girls or other boys. So because generally Venus is like pleasure and love life, right? So these are the spheres of life where they'll be totally different, and it's better to go by your intuition and your like inner voice and what feels now, instead of some plans or structures, putting yourself in a box. No, you want some freedom always.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously we have to take into account the sign that it's in, because like you're saying, and I agree with you, taking one planet out of a chart and just analysing it isn't a good thing. We should be looking at the chart as a whole. So I want to make sure that people also understand that, you know, we are concentrating at the moment on Venus retrograde in the chart, but we also need to remember that you're not just one planet. Just like when you first learn astrology, you think that you're just a Taurus, and then you realise, oh, I've got Mercury in Gemini, and I've got Moon in Leo or something, you know, and I've got a Virgo ascendant or something. You suddenly realise that your chart is more than just one thing. So we mustn't take just one planet in isolation anyway, because that's not a healthy thing to do. And I think people tend to learn about their own planets anyway. You know, you can give instructions for people, but people are born with their charts, and they'll make mistakes, and they'll take wrong turns, and they'll go in this direction, or maybe I need to go in that direction. And I think eventually most people come to accept, hopefully, who they are. And especially that's why astrology allows us that extra dimension to be able to understand ourselves that much more when we start unpicking all the bits that are in there, you know, and accepting that is what we are. We can't change it, but this is the chart that we're born with. And I think acceptance is a terribly important thing.
Yeah, but also to add to what you were saying, every Venus retrograde would differ.
Yeah.
Because, for example, just a quick note here in our SH chart, because it's opposing a Jupiter retrograde, who also rules the 9th house, and both are retrograde. So there will be a lot of like traveling, but also issues with traveling. So issues with foreigners, like she will be awkward with foreigners, with foreign customs, like what things feels natural for her, but then comes someone from like some tropical country, and after some point, like, oh, we are quite different. Like, I don't know what to do with you. You don't seem like natural for me. Or, for example, these two planets, Venus and Jupiter, being in opposition and retrograde in 1st and 7th house, also make issues with friends, because both of these planets also rule friendship. It's not just love, interest, and romantic stuff. Yeah, so there will be, you know, friends will be maybe backstabbing you or something like that, or disagreeing with you, or thinking like, oh my God, she's like, you know, talking not fluffy things behind your back. But also, for example, Mars with Cancer, with Moon in Cancer in the 4th house, would also make similar thing, that whatever she pours out her heart and gives something to someone, like does nice things to people, it usually is interpreted in a day chart where Mars is very you know, at odds, as those people becoming your enemies because of you helping them, something like that. So all of this, you know, if you see repetition of cookbook pieces, then you can like assert this. Because otherwise, if you take, you know, as you were saying, like ancient book and see what does Venus with Jupiter mean, and oh my god, la, 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 then you will get scared. But it's extremes because it's designed to make you understand that. Because if we would have subtle definitions, then our interpretation would be like bland soup. There will be no decision there. There will be no focus there. So of course you have to take into mind your entire chart, also your entire history, because even if the books are fantastic and super detailed, there might be something wrong in the book that does not apply to you because of some other like techniques, because not every astrologer knows everything.
Really? Is there one astrologer that knows everything?
Yeah, so never, you should never get really scared of negative interpretation. I mean, there are some aspects in astrology that make you prone to absorb the negative interpretation, and like Saturn, strong Saturn, etc. Like you will want to read more negative about yourself.
Yes.
So it's very tricky with astrology. Yeah. So always take it, as just a piece that there is a lot of things you could do with them, and a lot of astrologers would do different things with that. Some would disagree about details, etc. But you as a person can discern, is this a trend that seems right or not? Right.
Yeah, because I mean, I've got Venus opposition Uranus in my chart. I've got Venus and Mars in Aquarius, and I've got Uranus in opposition. I can't remember if my Uranus is retrograde or not. I can't remember off the top of my head. Probably is. But they're in opposition. So I would be in a friendship or relationship that would always end suddenly. So there was no relationship that just toodled into the distance. Either was in it or out of it. And the same goes with friendships. I'm either in them or out them. And I've had sort of half friendships that have ended suddenly, not long friendships. I've got friendships that have gone on for a long time. But you say that, Venus is also a friendship planet. But that's in my case is an opposition to Uranus. But in Shushi's chart, she's got a lot of squares, she's got a lot of oppositions, and the squares, I always say the squares are the challenges that we give ourselves. The outside world will reflect them to us, those squares, and we'll think it's, because in my case I've got Sun and Moon square, and I thought my mother was a horrible person until I realized that was my projection to her. It's because I'm no good at and in Shushi's chart she also has Sun and Moon square. The moon is how we feel and the sun is who we are, so we're not so good at looking after our little inner child type of thing, So it's a challenging chart, but what you get in a challenging chart is people that can do more. Yeah, if I always say if people have just got sextiles and trines in their chart, they're not going to do too much. They're just going to be the Buddha. Yeah, they're just not going to do anything. But if you've got all those itchy squares and oppositions and stuff, maybe you'll go off there on your horse and you'll be riding into the distance and doing something a bit more exciting.
For example, here you're saying like difficult oppositions and squares, but Jupiter opposing Venus will also make her quite lazy. So even though if it's like opposition, so you can, because they are in she also has Moon in Cancer, Sun in Aries, and Saturn in Aquarius, so planets in dignities, and Venus is also in her bounds, so also in dignity. So it's something easy to add onto these things. I also realized we kind of missed one important point, that when Venus is retrograde and combust, it's not as severe of a combustion effect as when Venus is direct, because when the Venus is direct and goes retrograde, the running kid around the king, the sun, she is behind, so you don't see her through your window. But when she's retrograde, you can see her a little bit maybe in front of the sun, so you can sense the presence that something has passed the sun, even if it's blinded, right? So she's closer, but also retrograde is more assured about herself, as we said, while combust is the opposite. All the other planets except Mercury and Venus can't be combust and retrograde at the same time, because it's the opposite. Like retrograde is more like I am my own kind of person, and combust is, oh, well, please somebody notice me, right?
Yeah.
So when Venus and Mercury are these two things at the same time, the retrograde part stays on, but the combustion is not so severe, because this person has all the toolkit within themselves to navigate, this abundance issues or something like that. But,
there's also a grand trine in the a grand cross in the chart. Sorry. Oh, we've frozen. Oh, come back. Oh dear. Come back. We have frozen. Da, 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 da. We're back. Okay. I think you come back. Yes, no, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't hear your entire comment after I finished talking.
We've got a grand cross in the chart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing to think as well. So everything, a lot of her planets are also cardinal. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's male or female. We have to remember that charts don't tell you if something's male or female. It doesn't tell you anything, as it could be a date that you start a business or something. But we have got a grand cross in this chart, and it's all in cardinal signs. And my understanding is that cardinal signs live in the future, fixed signs live in the present, and mutable signs live in the past in their minds. So cardinal signs are more likely to want to plan ahead. And she does have Uranus and Neptune conjunct, and that only happens once every 170 years. And then that's opposition Mars, and Mars is the ruling planet to her sun sign. So it's quite a significant chart. It's interesting how people can be born at a moment when there's so much activity planetarily wise. I think that needs to be taken into account as well. And I think she's going to come up for a Saturn return too as well, because she's got Saturn in Aquarius, and Saturn is in Aquarius at the moment. So yeah, it's a busy chart. I did go back, Shush, just to let you know, I did go back to look at the dates of when the relationships that you've had started and finished, and a lot of them were under a Uranus transit. So Uranus was transiting through the sign of Aries, and Uranus is the freedom planet. So as it went past your sun sign and your Venus, and some of the relationships that you had were constructed during the Uranus transit, and Uranus doesn't really want to settle down. So if you start a relationship under a Uranus transit, you're less likely to want to stay with that one person forever, because what you're thinking about in the back of your mind is the freedom thing. So it's good to date someone during a Uranus retrograde, not Uranus, but Uranus transit. It's fine to date them, but for long-term relationships, you need to keep in mind, will I still want to be with this person when this transit finishes? It's about 8 years for Uranus to go through each sign of the zodiac. So relationships obviously can survive, but just recognition that where is my freedom within this relationship, because freedom becomes very acute during a Uranus transit. I love Uranus transits. So Gregory, we're running out of time, but just to give me a summary of what else would you like to tell us about this situation, this planet, this chart? What else do you think is important for us today?
I would have a lot to say. Like, I would look for, especially for like progressions, and give some dates where planets are activated, and probably we will get some hits of her relationships attempts, and what kind of relationships that are. We would look at what point of time have Venus turned direct, and if Jupiter turns direct, what ages?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, so let's just 2 minutes. I will list this to give you an example of how it looks like. So, 7 days before her birth, Mercury actually changed direction to be direct. So 7 days before and after birth, if retrogrades happens, changing direction, etc., or heliacal phases, that's important. So she has actually more retrograde energy than it looks so. When she was 7, the Venus and Jupiter opposition in the chart became perfect. So with retrograde planets, you have to be careful, because what you think is applying to what, like what's the next aspect, might be something else. So the actual aspect is indeed this opposition. So it happened when she was 7. So next year, 8 years, is a Venus year. Then what else? When she was 12, it's Jupiter year. So maybe there is some kind of clue. When she's 15, moves to Aries, and also is Mars activation, because 15 years of age. We have something here. Venus is conjunct Mercury when Libra is activated in profections. So probably there is some kind of like sexual experiments around 18. Maybe the first ones or not. When she's 20, progressed Venus is conjoined to progressed Moon. So the Moon gets activated, and it's almost in the third degree, and her natal Moon is the second degree. So the square of the Moon to the Moon gets activated at this point. Also, the sign of Sagittarius is activated in profection at this time, and also Mercury is activated, because 12 years is the amount of Mercury, and Jupiter plus Venus, so 12 plus 8 equals 20. So this is probably when we get a strong lunar type of relationship. So a lunar variant of relationships. When she's 21, Sun leaves Aries and goes to Taurus. So probably a little bit of change in character. When she's 24, Venus goes direct at 3 Aries. And Aries is actually years, so this is very important for Venus. Like, this is major for Venus. So what happens as she's 24 is going to be one of important interpretation of Venus in her life. Then a couple of things. What stands out? Sun plus Venus is 27th year, and Cancer is activated, which is also angular house. So probably something there happens. And the things, also Venus in the natal chart is going to square MC right away after aspecting Jupiter.
And that's in a progression, yes?
Yes, she still is within 5 degrees, I think, based on yes, she's at 13 degrees and MC is at 17. So she is aspecting MC, which is very like powerful for a planet. She also aspects Saturn, which rules the MC. So a job thing would be like some kind of retrograde Venusian for her, probably. But this gets activated precisely when she's 54.
Right, okay.
So at that time, probably maybe some kind of like business that like she ever like, has her Venus idea or something like that. When she's 57, Venus goes back to 20 Aries, where was the beginning of the retrogradation. So at this point, she has no more reminiscence of retrogradation. So even though she moved, what was the date? Where is Venus direct? At 24. So from 24 to 57 is the period of straightening out. So it's a period of smoothly transitioning from retrograde Venus to direct Venus. And whoever knows how to interpret that, right? She would just have to wait, but she can like have her like calendar in her mind that is this kind of like a longer like because it's a time that in progressions like Venus is catching up whatever was retrograde, right? So like she's almost like reversing all the retrograde. So it could be something totally different, right? Whoever knows. At 77, Venus conjoins the ascendant, so that will be something super important. Also, like the oh no, never mind. It's too much details. I got reminded of something like the bounds of ascendant are in the that it doesn't give children, and I got reminded that Jupiter here in 7th house also delays children or gives them a very not very much children or something like that. But well, I'm sidetracking.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one, Venus goes to Taurus when she's 78, and that's the end point where we can no longer think of retrograde period by any means.
Right.
So whole life before her, but if she gets there, there'll be a different kind of story, right?
Yeah. Oh, and this is what Erin says is important in her book on retrograde. She says, if you've got a retrograde planet, definitely do progresses. Now, I do that with clients. If they've got, and I've got Mercury retrograde, and it was really interesting seeing when it came out of retrograde, what age was I? You know, in reality, what age was I? And those things are really worth looking at. So I have got a podcast on progression. So I'll pause the audio and let you know to go back onto progressions. So thank you, Gregory, for going through in great detail once again with us. More information on Venus retrograde has been really helpful, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. And just give you the last word. So thank you very much for coming on and speaking on Learn Astrology with Mary today. So it's really great having you. And just let's have some final words from you, please.
Yeah, thank you for the occasion. Well, I would like to add so much about the chart or something like the details. I am so not satisfied with things we have said, but it's probably better for the listeners to not get another dump of informations. And I think it's lovely that we could compare our views, etc. You'll probably continue, so you'll have upper hands because you can keep your version in the following podcast episodes. Thank you for a nice talk and for having me.
Thank you very much, Gregory. We'll catch you soon. Bye now.